two different presentations tonight on our second night of this webinar series. And the first is going to be with one of our own members of OHASTA and a member of Elections Canada, and that's Melissa Chan. I'm going to give a quick biography of her and let you guys get going in the actual presentation. So, Melissa Chan is an Ontario certified teacher. She's based out of Markham and a regional education coordinator at Elections Canada. She's currently pursuing her master's in education in social justice at OISE and serves as a director at OHASTA, supporting inclusive history programs across Ontario. She's passionate about empowering young people to become engaged, informed change makers in their communities, and she's an excellent advocate for organizations that she represents. So welcome, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Butch. I'm very happy to be here. And hello, and thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. So bear with me as I narrate what I'm doing, because that's what everyone does on Zoom. I'm just sharing my screen. So just give me a thumbs up if you can see what's going on. So welcome to the first part of our webinar, which begins with my presentation called Unlock Civic Action with Your Students. So just a little bit about what I do and what Elections Canada does before we dive in. And so I am the Regional Education Coordinator for Elections Canada. So not only does Elections Canada run the federal elections, but we also have a very tiny but mighty civic education team. And so the civic education program at Elections Canada is about how do we engage future voters. Of course, students that we work with now, whether you're a high school teacher or elementary teacher, they are not yet voters, but we want to get to them early. I don't know about you, but to me, I feel like it's not sufficient just to have a grade 10 half course and expect all of a sudden when they turn 18 to show up at the polls. So, with the resources that we've developed at Elections Canada, we hope to engage youth and young people in a more meaningful way, bringing their lived experience into their learning and connecting with them, and so that they understand where they fit into our democracy. So, what I'll do today is first, I will be exploring one of our many resources called Civic Action Then and Now, and then we'll discuss a little bit about how we can apply this resource in our classroom, and then finally, you'll have an opportunity to download or order this resource for your classroom as well. And I will lead with this. It is completely free. You can order it. It will be shipped straight to your home or school in a matter of days. We're that quick. And so just so you know, it is free. All right. So, as I mentioned before, the resource we'll be looking at today is Civic Action Then and Now, but that is not the only resource we have. Take a look at all of the resources that we offer, and you'll notice that they are not limited to the civics classroom. We have connections to geography. If you teach geography, you have geography of elections, mapping electoral districts. Voting rights through time is an excellent one for your history classroom, even math. So as you can see, civic education is not just for civics class, as you know, but something that could be integrated in every subject area. Now, my personal favorite, I don't want to be biased here, but my personal favorite is the one I'm about to talk about. Okay, so here we go. This is Civic Action Then and Now. I'm keeping an eye on the clock because I know I have less than 25 minutes now. Okay, so this resource and all of our resource starts with a minds on. We want to bring our students' past experiences and knowledge into this learning. And the way we do this is by asking this question. And I want to pose this question to all of you here today, too. So if you want to speak out, turn on your mic, or if you want to put it in the chat, Butch, if you don't mind keeping an eye on the chat for me, please, thank you. And so here's the question. What is one thing you would like to change in your school, community, or society? So if you don't mind taking a moment to either shout it out or pop it in the chat. I'm curious.
Well, I'm thinking maybe a civics course can be more than 0.5 of a course. That's
Oh,
something
wouldn't
that
that
would be awesome of a change.
I love that idea and I support that idea in full. I love it. Great. Any other ideas?
We got
Um,
a chat thing saying 4-day work week.
Oh, for I also great ideas tonight. I know it's late, but these ideas are on fire. I love it. Any,
uh,
yep.
at my school, we just had an email sent out that unfortunately there was a racist incident where there were some signs that were written like right next to school in the snow. And yeah, so our students saw that. So that would be something that I would want to see change is not having our students exposed to racist language on the daily. It's pretty awful.
That is awful. I'm sorry to hear that. That is definitely something that needs to be addressed. Um, Racism that kids and teachers alike um, experience daily, right? It's something that's still prevalent and something that needs to change for sure. Thank you for sharing that.
We had engagement in local elections that came to me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Our voter turnout is not great. And that's definitely something that could be addressed and changed. Thank you for all of these ideas. And I would also add, I'm sure many of you might want to not hear the numbers 6 and 7 together in a sentence. That's something that I would like changed immediately, please. So having said that, these are some of the things that our students have written in the past, right? Making school start time start later, more funding for mental health. So I'm asking them to think about what they care about. Now, here's the challenging part, and I'm going to ask this question to you too. What could you do to change it? And I'm not saying from a systems level, but you as an individual, what could you do to address that problem? Now, a lot of students at this point, they get stuck, right? They're like, I don't know, I'm just in grade 7. What am I supposed to do? Like, I'm just in grade 10. Like, I'm talking about world hunger. How am I supposed to fix world hunger? That is very valid. And a lot of times, even for grown adults like me, that's where we stop because it just feels so hopeless and it feels impossible to address these issues. But what I always like to tell students is today I'm here to tell you that there is hope. And I'm not just saying that because I'm naive or I'm overly optimistic, but because we have evidence. And our evidence is in our history. Our history, and what I mean by that is history not just like facts and numbers. I'm sure all of you know that very well, but they're stories. They're stories of humans and regular people like you and me. And the change we see today is a product of civic action, and often not from people in places of power, right? It usually starts from people who want something to change, regular people. Could be teachers, could be students. And so that's what we want to introduce in this resource. Stories from the past that we can learn from, and we can learn from to use as a framework to address the issues that we care about today, right? So, in this resource, it comes with two case studies. So two stories from the past that you could use in the classroom. One of them being women and the vote, so how women gained the right to vote in Canada. Right, that's a very inspiring story, of course. And many students actually don't know that women didn't have the right to vote in Canada, and they're shocked. But it wasn't too long ago. And this was a product of civic action from women and men alike who believe that you know, we have a voice. We have a voice and we should be included in our democracy. So that's one of the available case studies. Another case study that's available is Aboriginal and treaty rights in Canada's constitution. Now, I know it says Aboriginal, and I want to preface this by saying we know that that's a term we no longer use, and we agree on that. However, the reason why this case study is still called Aboriginal and Treaty Rights is because Aboriginal is the term that is used in our legal documents and is a term that you will encounter in our legal documents. And for that reason, we've kept that word. So, in this case study, we talk about how Indigenous people secured their rights in our Constitution, right? And that was a long and lengthy fight, but they were able to do it again through different civic actions.
And I'd say that
So, yeah.
to interject on you there, Melissa, I
Yeah.
watched both of these videos today. They're less than 2 minutes. They're great quick hitters to start conversation and give a good background too. So um,
Yeah,
highly
absolutely.
recommend them.
Yes, we definitely recommend you to use these videos, and they'll be included in the resource. However, the point I want to make with this is these are two case studies that you can use in your class. But I want to talk about how I was able to take it a next step further. So, just for context, I live in Markham. So, if you are familiar with the Markham in this area, a lot of the students are predominantly East Asian. So while these case studies are very powerful and very impactful and inspiring, I for me, I feel like it didn't connect with the kids the way I wanted to. So what I was able to do with this resource is develop a case study which feels more culturally relevant to the students that I was working with. And so that's what I want to show you today, the case study that I developed. So this is something that you could do with your students, develop another case study to kind of engage your students in a different way, something that you could ask students to do based off of the initial case studies, or something that you could try to do as well, depending on the demographic that you're working with. So the case study I decided to look at was how Chinese Canadians gain the right to vote. Okay, so let's take a look here. I'll just kind of walk you through the case study that I've developed, and then how I used the framework from the the resource to supplement that. Right. So obviously, before 1947, the following people were not able to vote, and students can quickly identify that, oh, it's because they're Chinese, right? And so why was that the case? And so here is where I give a little bit of historical context. Whereas in the case studies that's already included in the resource, you could play a video. Here I'm introducing a different story, right? Right. So Chinese people first came to Canada in 1788, right? And a lot of kids are surprised by that because I mean, Confederation was 1867. And they helped build our country. And I'm not going to give us the full background here, but just to show you, I'm giving students a little bit of historical context. Now, what did they do in order to gain the right to vote, despite the circumstances that they're in? Right? So we're confronted with that same problem where we have something that we want to change, but we don't know how to do it. What are some actions that we can do? So at this point of the activity, now this is when both resources, like this is the resource framework. Students will read activity cards out loud and discuss what type of civic action it is. So we'll be introducing to students this civic action framework, because civic action in itself is it's very abstract. Like, what does civic action mean? So what we do in this resource is we introduce this framework which divides it into four categories, right? Participating as an individual, working together as a group, building public support, and working through the political system. So what we're doing with these cards is we're asking students to decide what type of civic action it is. Okay, so I'll give you some examples of some of the cards that I've created, and students would have to discuss in groups where they think this civic action belongs on the framework. So let's try to do this together. Would anyone like to read this card for us?
Sure, I'll hop in.
Thank you.
Define your identity. The Chinese Canadian Club was formed in 1914 in Victoria, British Columbia. They invented the term Chinese Canadian to challenge the idea that the Chinese were foreigners or outsiders. What type of civil action is this?
Okay. So if you want to put it in the chat or just shout it out, what type of civic action do you think this is?
Working together as a group.
Okay. And why do you say that?
The Chinese Canadian Club sounds like they got together to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely an indicator, right? It's not one person deciding to create this term, but it was a group of people coming together to form this club and finding means to affirm their identity. Any other ideas?
Maybe building public support because it's
Okay.
changing the terminology, as it says.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this card because it's something a term that I use regularly. I identify as a Chinese Canadian myself. And it's for me a moment of realization that at one point this term did not exist because you could either be Chinese or you could be Canadian. If you're Canadian, they assume you to look a certain way, not like this. And so creating this was shocking at the time. It was unheard of and it was strange and people had looks and it was confusing, but it was a powerful statement to show that this is what one type of civic action. And what I love about this too is that the Chinese Canadian Club was formed by high school students, 17-year-olds who decided to invent this term. I find that to be very empowering for our young people today. Okay, let's do another example. In light of Remembrance Day that we've just observed yesterday, anyone want to read this card for us?
Sure, I'll read it.
Thank you.
Serve in the military. Young people like Mary Kobong and John Kobong joined the Canadian Armed Forces. They wanted to prove their loyalty, ability, and desire to participate in Canadian democracy during the Second World War.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And you might recognize the name Mary Kobong and John Kobong briefly because those were the people that I introduced earlier. So there you are, Mary Kobong and John Kobong, both young people when they enlisted and decided to join the military. So again, I'll ask this question, what type of civic action is this?
Is like volunteering or enlisting an action? Because I would say that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so where do you think that fits in the framework of the four options on the right?
Uh, Let me just zoom in. Oh, okay. I mean, it's a little bit of both. I know that I teach history, so I would say in this case, it's actually is building public support because what we learned about was that there was a lot of movement from Douglas Young and others. Their arguments were specifically that they could gain more rights if they supported Canada. So in some
Yeah.
cases, it was strategic for them to show their loyalty, right? They were thinking this is a way to show how much we care about our country. And then
Mm-hmm.
maybe we can push for some rights. They should have already had, obviously, but so it's
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? Using that as leverage in our political system as well, you could say. And the fact that, they're wearing the uniform, that in itself is a political statement, right? How do people look at you differently now that you're wearing the Canadian flag on your arm? That those are some pieces to consider. And so because of time, I'm seeing here, I'm just going to briefly go over this. Another example is building alliances. And I love this card because a lot of times we study history in silos. This is Chinese Canadian history. This is Black history. This is um, First Nations history. But I think it's important to show that there could be solidarity networks and groups work with one another. And it's not just about advancing your own group's rights, but working with another to build solidarity and have this collective action. And so the East Indian and First Nations and Chinese, they came together to protest their lack of democratic right. How? They actually refused to serve in the Second World War. We always learn about how, oh, they served in the war to prove their rights. That's one way. Now, this is a different strategy. They said, no, we're not going to fight your war because we don't have rights. We're not being treated as everyone else. We're not being treated as Canadians. So I think this is also a different perspective to share. Okay, so with that, those are just some of the different cards that I've developed. But please note that in the resource that you order, it will come with these cards that are already pre-written. So it's not like, oh my goodness, I have to write my own cards. I have to do all this historical research. I'm just showing you an example of if you wanted to adapt it. And if you're interested in seeing what those pre-written cards look like, I will point you to that website shortly after. But just please note that with the case studies that are already in this resource. These cards and civic actions are already there for you, and you just need to give it to your class. It's very turnkey. Now, the most important part of this resource to me is this consolidation piece. We don't want students just to leave like, oh, great, they did civic action, that's it. I want to bring it back to the question we started with. What is that issue that you care about? Now we've learned what the civic action framework, how can we apply that to address these issues? So what I like to do in my class is I ask them to go into groups, and those groups are on things that they care about. So maybe one group will be addressing racism at school, another group will be addressing maybe developing a full grade 10 civics course. And so they will have to use sticky notes to create their own action cards related to their specific issue. So, for example, for racism, I'll ask them, okay, what are some individual actions you can do? What are ways you can work through the political system? What are ways you can work in a group? What are ways you can, what's the last one? Man, I should know this, shouldn't I? Oh, it's right there. Work together as a group, build public support, right? So different ways you could do these things. And so now it's not as intimidating because we have a framework to work with, and we realize that change is not one person against the problem. It's all of us coming in with different skill sets, coming in with different experiences, different knowledge to create this change together. And so students realize that change is actually possible. It's not just a make-believe naive thought, but because we learned from the past and now we have a framework to work with, they are motivated and empowered to do this work as well. Okay, so I'm keeping an eye on time, so I'm going to close off here. How do we order this resource? Great question. All you need to do is go on our website, electionsanddemocracy.ca. And if you follow that link, I'll show you. This is what the website looks like. All right. And so you go to activities for your classroom. You click on the resource that you're interested in. See, these are all of our resources. Okay. Okay, access this lesson, and you just click order. And there you are. This is how you can get your own copy of the resource, or you could just download it virtually for your classroom as well. And the last thing I will say is that if you are in the Markham and GTA region, I also do classroom demonstrations, meaning that I can come to your classroom and demonstrate this resource for you and your class, so you don't have to read the teacher's guide, even though the teacher's guide is great, because I know people put a lot of work into writing that teacher's guide. But if you don't have time to do that, you can ask me to come in and I can demonstrate the resource for you in your class, and so that you can feel more confident and supported in teaching this resource. So that is also something that we offer. And if you're interested in that demonstration, my email is also listed there at the bottom. So feel free to contact me if you have any questions or if you're interested in a demo, and I'll be there. So with that, thank you so much for your time and your attention tonight. And I'm very happy to pass the time to the next presenter.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Um, One of the things that I really like about this is that the presentation itself can be adapted to the area that you're in, right? So you've given a framework where, if in my community, for example, we have a very high Spanish population coming in Southern Ontario with our migrant workers, and we have lots of low German workers. We could probably take some of those stories and adapt to the same framework and apply it similar to what you have. So your area of interest is uh, looking at Chinese Canadians and the experiences that they had. Students want to see their story reflected in history and in the classroom, and that's such an important and powerful feature. So I really appreciate that feature and that framework to kind of guide it. So good job with that. Thank you. Um, we're going to move to our second half, and Valerie Emond is going to be the person that's going to lead that. So I'll turn it over to Val now. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. Very inspiring. And I've used the resources in the past, and I love the conversation that it creates. I just love seeing the students debating over what it is. So great job. All right. So I have a few questions for you people. Should healthcare be culturally sensitive? What do children owe their aging parents? And or should we limit online speech to prevent misinformation? Great questions. So the Ethics Bowl is a new way to debate, which involves teams of high school students designing the best position on contemporary ethical dilemmas. And this is the introduction to our next guest, which is Mr. Elliot Carter. Elliot is Outreach Officer and Sessional Lecturer in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Toronto. He runs the Ontario Ethics Bowl and leads other projects involving, sorry, I need to read from here, involving extending ethics education beyond the philosophy classroom. He has a PhD in philosophy and has published on issues at the intersection of philosophy and cognitive science. So without further ado, here's to you, Elliot.
All right. So yeah, thank you very much for that introduction. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about the, oh, that's not supposed to go forward by itself. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about the Ethics Bowl. So I run the Ethics Bowl in Ontario out of the University of Toronto, Mississauga. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Ethics Bowl is and what some of the motivations for the Ethics Bowl are and how you can get involved and what that would look like. So I want to start by sort of zooming out and looking at some of the motivations behind the Ethics Bowl. So when I talk to people about the state of education, many people express concern about the state of civil discourse, both in classrooms, but also like in society at large. Uh, um, Now, of course, like concerns like this aren't new. And I think on this topic, a nice place to start is with the words of the 19th century English philosopher and famous defender of political liberalism, John Stuart Mill. So Mill's defense of civil discourse on matters of controversy is pretty incisive and it's persistent in the way it's relevant. So Mill says in his famous book on liberty, the peculiar evil of silencing the expression of an opinion. Oh, sorry. These are on timers and I didn't intend for them to be. So maybe I can fix that real quick. Okay, never mind. Sorry. So Mill says the peculiar evil of silencing the expression of opinion is that it is robbing the human race, posterity, as well as the existing generation, those who dissent from the opinion still more than those who hold it. If the opinion is right, they're deprived of the opportunity of exchanging error for truth. If wrong, they lose what is almost as great a benefit, the clearer perception of and livelier impression of truth produced by its collision with error. And later on in the chapter, Mill says 99 in 100 of what are called educated men are in this condition, even of those who can argue fluently for their opinions. Their conclusion may be true, but it might be false for anything they know. They've never thrown themselves into the mental position of those who think differently from them. And considering what such persons may have to say, and consequently, they do not, in any proper sense of the word, know the doctrine which they themselves profess. Okay, so what's Mill saying here? He's saying that common opinions, even ones that are true, have to be tested by taking seriously the perspectives of the people who would dissent from them. And it's not enough here just to know like what the other side would argue, because that's compatible with only engaging in bad faith. And I think when you hear this idea, you're probably reminded of like contemporary political situations. And I think when people express concern about the state of civil discourse in a contemporary society, Mill's concerns here seem closely related to our contemporary situation. So we could ask, okay, are we living up to this ideal that Mill sets forward? Are we living up to it in our politics and in our system of education? And if we're not living up to it, what can we do about it? And in particular, what would a form of education that embodied this ideal look like, right? So what would it be to educate in a way that involves taking seriously the positions of people who disagree with us, not just knowing their arguments, but trying to like really understand things from their perspective. So I think this is part of the motivation behind the ethics bowl, and that's why I'm kind of belaboring this point about civil discourse, right? So what is the ethics bowl? Well, the ethics bowl is similar to a high school debate tournament with some key differences. So in ethics bowl, you have two teams which analyze and discuss ethical dilemmas. the teams consist of 3 to 7 students on each team, and they cover ethical cases, right? So some of the cases that Valerie mentioned in the introduction, those would be examples. These are cases on current ethical issues. They could be social, political, scientific. Often they're controversies. Sometimes they're just kind of like interesting questions of which people might have strong and diverse opinions. And then we have expert judges who score the teams on their presentations, and as well as their commentaries on the other teams. And teams have to respond to questions from the judges, and then they're scored on how they respond to the judges' questions as well. So, okay, what then makes Ethics Bowl different from a traditional debate? So, in a traditional debate format, a team would be assigned a position at the beginning. And then they would have to defend that position sort of come what may, right? So they don't get to decide what they think about an issue. They just have to think about, like, what a defender of this position might say. Ethics Bowl is different in this respect. In Ethics Bowl, teams craft their positions on real ethical questions. So the task for them is not just like think of, what you think a defender of this view might say, but try to really figure out what do you think is right about this issue. Another difference is that in traditional debates, the structure is kind of purely adversarial, right? So you can only sort of win at the expense of the other side, right? You win by knocking down the other team's position. Ethics Bowl, on the other hand, involves a sort of collaborative dimension. So it's still a competition, so it's still competitive, but teams are incentivized to take feedback into account. In Ethics Bowl, you have teams responding to commentary and questions from judges, and it's seen as a good thing if the team is willing to change their position in response to good points that the judge or the other team makes, right? So that's not seen as some sort of like concession where they're failing to, defend their position that they've been assigned. That's seen as like them engaging in the kind of rational process of like sort of reasoning together about an issue. So in Ethics Bowl, we take that to be a good thing. We want to see teams like taking commentary and criticism and difficult questions seriously. In traditional debates, the strategy would be developed in a matter of minutes. You hear the case and you have to come up with what to say. In Ethics Bowl, the positions are developed over a period of months-long inquiry. So teams get cases months in advance, and they get to do research on the cases. They get to try to come up with their best possible arguments. They get to, as I'll talk about in a moment, they get to engage in like exhibition matches. They might get chances to discuss the cases with teachers or with experts on those issues. And so they can really come up with what they think is like the best and strongest case. So it's not all just a matter of what they can think of when they're put on the spot. Another way of sort of characterizing the difference is that traditional debates tend to reward rhetorical talents and a kind of ingenuity in defending a position. So you can look really good in a debate by coming up with, a difficult question for your opponent where you kind of put them on the spot and embarrass them because they can't come up with something to say in response or something like that. In Ethics Bowl, we tend not to be looking for those sorts of talents so much. What we're looking for are more things like abilities for active listening, for open-mindedness, and for careful reasoning about an issue. Okay, so here's some example of Ethics Bowl cases, I think some of which Valerie already mentioned. So one is, should we lower the voting age? Surprisingly, the teams I've heard present on this case mostly argued that no, in fact, it would be a bad idea if people my age could vote. So I don't know, there's some irony there. But it seems like a sort of pressing question, if our political decisions impact people, all sorts of people, why are some people denied the vote simply because of their age? Another question is, what do younger people owe to their aging parents? Just because your parents took care of you, does that create a debt or an obligation that you have towards them? Do we have a responsibility to diversify our friend groups? Is it okay if your friends are all from the same sort of socioeconomic, racial, or gender categories? Is that a kind of failure of some kind of personal responsibility? Should teachers avoid disclosing their political views when teaching? I'm sure this is a question that some of you have thought about and encountered while you're teaching. What is the rationale behind the idea that teachers should stay politically neutral, and should they stay politically neutral when they're teaching? One that we have in our cases this year is, what's the point of public art? Is it a failure of public art if it's divisive and some people don't like it? Why do we have public art in the first place? Is this a good use of money if it could be spent to say, feed the hungry? Does everyone have a right to have and raise children? Another one of our cases for this year, it raises the sort of controversial possibility of sort of licensing for parents. What would be wrong with that if there's indeed something wrong with that? And do we have a responsibility to challenge friends and family who are less informed about a political issue? Is it okay to ignore deep political, moral differences of opinion in order to get along with your friends and family? Do you have some responsibility to challenge them if you think you're in a position to do so, if you think you know more? So those are just some of the cases that teams have discussed, some from previous years, some from this year, but you get a sense of the kinds of things that an ethics bowl team might be asked to talk about. Okay, so what does a match in the ethics bowl actually look like? Well, here's the structure of an ethics bowl match. So it begins with a kind of introduction and a question from the moderator, which sort of gets the team to sort of frame their response to the case. So they know the case in advance, and there's a moderator question which kind of gets them to highlight some aspect of the case. So it sort of gets them started in the discussion. Then the first team will give a presentation for 5 minutes in their response to the moderator's question. And then there's a break where the second team can confer and then give a response to the first team's presentation. So they give their commentary, which involves giving feedback on things that the first team said, maybe raising some difficult questions. Again, the second team doesn't have to overall disagree with what the first team said. They might say, we largely agree with your opinion, but here are some questions for you that maybe you didn't think about. It's not designed to be necessarily adversarial here. And again, after Team B's commentary, there's a 2-minute conferral period, and then Team A gets to respond. And they can respond to the feedback, they could clarify things that they said, and they could also refine their position, right? So as I mentioned before, one of the things that they might choose to do is to change some of their views or some of the details of their views in response to Team B's commentary if it makes sense to do so. Now, they don't have to do so. It's not like they'll be penalized for not changing their mind or anything like that. But we don't see that as a problem if they want to incorporate feedback in that way. After Team A's response, there's a judge Q&A, where usually there'll be 3 judges, and each of them will ask a question to the team, and they'll respond. And usually the judge questions are getting them to explore something more deeply from their presentation. And then at this point, the teams will switch roles. So Team B will now be in the role described as Team A's role here. And after that, the match will be concluded. And in a typical tournament, there'll be maybe 4 matches that a team will take part in. And then at the end of the day, there'll be sort of the event standings, and you'll be able to see who came out on top in terms of overall votes from the judges. So Ethics Bowl, we hope at least that it is helping students to develop certain skills in the way that it's structured and the things that we're asking them to do. So we hope that Ethics Bowl is encouraging students to develop nuanced views on real social and political issues. We also hope that Ethics Bowl is encouraging students to develop intellectual openness and curiosity about other perspectives. So going back to Mill's ideal for civil discourse, the ideal sort of approach to Ethics Bowl is one on which you are getting deeply curious about like what the reasons are for dissenting perspectives, right? So not just, you know, being able to say, oh, here's an argument, but I know how to knock down that argument, but like being like, you know, deeply considerate of like what's this other person's perspective like? Do they have a good point somewhere? Is there something about what they've said that I could incorporate into my view? Um, they also developed an ability to synthesize and incorporate new information, and an ability to disagree respectfully without dismissiveness. And I think this is really important. So there's going to be disagreement in matches, but we expect that that can happen in a civil way. Where other people are being accorded respect. And that means more than just sort of like paying lip service to their ideas and being polite, but actually like taking into consideration the points that they're raising. Also, we hope that Ethics Bowl develops an ability to persuade through careful reasoning rather than just rhetorical tricks. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about the history of Ethics Bowl in Ontario and in Canada. It started in Canada in 2014 in Winnipeg, and then came to Ontario in 2020. And it was much smaller at the time. We didn't have like all these regional events that we have now. It was just sort of one event, but it's grown quite a bit under the stewardship of Jeff Siness, who's my predecessor in this role at University of Toronto, Mississauga, where in 2025, the Ethics Bowl in Ontario involves a partnership between 11 universities across the province. We had 9 regional events in Ontario in 2025. These took place in February, and these involved in total over 100 teams from about 50 high schools. And the winning teams, or the teams that qualified from each of the regional events, came to University of Toronto Mississauga for the provincial championship in March. And so 24 teams came to UTM in March. And then the qualifying teams from the provincial championship went on to the national championship in Winnipeg in April. So if you look at the Ethics Bowl season, and the current Ethics Bowl season is underway, right now we're at the stage where teams are registering, mostly like registered at this point, and cases have been released for the year. The first part is okay. So the first part of the season is in September. Teams begin to register and they begin to prepare. And then in October, the cases for the season are released. So we have a case writing committee at the sort of umbrella national organization, Ethics Bowl Canada. They put together the cases for the year. And then those are distributed to teams and they get to start to work on them. And then in November, we start to have an online exhibition season, probably getting started maybe early December this year, where teams can participate in practice matches online and they can get real feedback from expert judges so they can learn about how to improve. And then regional events begin to take place in February. So the regional events take place at all of our partner universities throughout the province. And then the qualifying teams from the regional events advance to the Ontario Provincial Championship, which, as I said, takes place at U of T Mississauga in March. And then the top provincial teams would advance to the nationals in Winnipeg, and that's in April. So that's a snapshot of what the season looks like. So we're in the middle of this year, and this will all take place again next year. There is a registration fee for teams to take part in Ethics Bowl. It's $350 per team, and there are discounts for additional teams from the same school. But out of this, teams get to participate in a regional event, which takes place at one of the partner universities, and usually this includes things like lunch for everybody. And they get a chance to advance to the provincial championship. And at the provincial championship, we cover the cost of hotels for all teams that come to stay in Mississauga. And they also get a chance to advance to the national championship in Winnipeg. And if they advance to nationals, then airfare and hotels are covered for them as well. So the travel expenses are all paid for at that point. And they get access to exhibition matches with feedback from our expert judges. And you can see here it's the team that won in 2024 from Assumption High School. I think they're in Windsor. And that's Jeff there, who I mentioned earlier. Okay, so that is what I wanted to say. If you want to get involved with Ethics Bowl, you can go to www.ethicsbowl.ca. There are some regional tournaments where you could still register a team this year, but you can certainly check things out and decide maybe whether you want to register a team for next year. And you can also email me, and I'm happy to talk about Ethics Bowl anytime, any place. My email here, elliot.carter@utoronto.ca. So great. That's basically what I wanted to say. Thanks very much.
Wow. Awesome, Elliot. Very inspiring. And I can totally see the value of developing those skills in our youth right now, like just public speaking and forming an opinion and oral skills that they tend to lack and miss because they chat, they text, they don't talk to each other. So definitely something valuable to learn, and forming an opinion for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it's quite inspiring to see, especially like the teams that the best teams, but really all the teams, but especially kind of like the teams that make it to the provincial levels and beyond, like the level of like public discourse that they're exhibiting, and the level of sort of care and thoughtfulness about like other people's views, and like it's really inspiring. Like if you're depressed about the state of civic discourse in our politics and society, it's kind of a nice pick me up. So,
Butch, do you have a question, or are there any people
Yeah,
with questions?
yeah. Ellie, just wondering there, like it seems very generous the way it's set up there, but how's the funding work for that? Like you guys are getting funding through the universities, or it seems like a quite a generous setup to get a teacher going on it.
yeah, that's right. That's right. So yeah, the cost of registering teams does not come even close to covering all the costs associated with the ethics bowl. So yeah, we do have a partnership system set up that where it is funded by the universities who are the partners, and they all love being involved. Are happy to do it. I think largely for them, it's kind of the sort of community outreach program, right? So the hope is that they can, get people excited about coming to the university and engaging in public discourse and meeting a bunch of professors and grad students and people at the university. And so for them, it's, there are many motivations for it, but yeah, I think it's worth their while.
Yeah, I can see that
Rachel?
definitely.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, my question is, if teachers wanted to kind of get started or learn more and maybe incorporate some of these techniques into their classrooms without actually getting involved in the bowl itself for maybe the first year, dipping their toe in, are there resources like at that website that you mentioned that they could access?
Yeah, definitely. Here, I'll just put a link in the chat to the Getting Started page, which would be a great place to start. And if you want to have a look at like previous cases or this year's cases or other, sort of the things about like the structure of the ethics bowl matches and how they work, that's all on there. Also, all the sort of rules and the rubric for scoring is on there too. So one thing you could do is organize like an ethics bowl in the classroom as just a fun thing to do. And it could be a interesting like educational tool. So yeah,
Right. Thank you.
no problem.
I'm gonna ask just because, but is everything just in English so far? You don't have any French version of all your material?
There is a French ethics bowl. Yeah. So I'm not involved in organizing it, but yeah, we do have the ethics bowl in French. I don't know what all the locations are for the French bowl. I think they're mostly in Quebec, but we do have a French bowl. We also have French nationals. So I did go to the nationals last year, and we had the English nationals and the French nationals happening in Winnipeg, just across the river from each other. And then at the very end of the event, we like met on the bridge, and it was a
Oh,
nice moment. So, yeah,
oh, I'm gonna find some candidates for that for sure.
yeah, awesome.
Any other questions? How long are the debate? I was just looking at the timing. Like, so when sequence, like how long does it last?
Like the whole event is so each match is 1 hour.
1 hour.
And
Okay.
then, yeah, so each team's half of the match is just half an hour, but that's divided up into all those parts, right? So their presentation on the case is just 5 minutes, and there's all these breaks where they get to confer and like talk to each other in between. So
Okay.
yeah,
And do the participant have to provide their research, or do they just come up with their speech?
yeah, I mean, they could bring. They're not supposed to bring written notes with them,
Okay.
but they can certainly do research and mention things they've discovered in their research in their presentation. Um, so yeah, they definitely can research the issues, and that can be part of their presentation.
Okay. Awesome. Anybody else has a question? Oh, thank you so much again.
Great. Well, thank you for
That was
having me.
great. Awesome.